Hello and welcome to today's session on bears. I'm so thrilled to be facilitating this session today, as bears have always played an important part of my life. Growing up in Canada, bears were all around us, and I always felt a deep connection and need to protect them. I spent the first part of my career working with black bears and grizzly bears. However, I learned early on that there are other bear species around the world that desperately needed help. So I've spent the last 14 years protecting spectacle bears in Peru. Every person on this planet depends on wild places for oxygen, fresh water, and healthy ecosystems. And we can save wild places simply by protecting one species of animal, bears. Because bears are found in so many different places, by protecting bears, we actually protect 1/3 of our planet, covering 4 different continents. There are 8 species of bears found from the Arctic to Peru, to Borneo, and even Europe, and they need a variety of habitats to survive. Protecting habitats for bears benefits thousands of other species, including ourselves. If the land is healthy enough to support a fit bear population, then it is also healthy enough to support humans. People have been fascinated with bears throughout time and around the world. They have captivated the human imagination and have become woven into the fabric of myths and legends. Bears are part of human culture in countless ways, from First Nation ceremonies to even teddy bears. Bears also play an extremely important role in the environment. By eating fruit and nuts, they disperse the seeds and they help the forest to regenerate. Today, you will learn about 5 incredible species: Andean bears, grizzly bears, black bears, sun bears, and polar bears. So, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you my colleague and really good friend, Renzo Piana, who will talk about, of course, my favorite bear, the spectacled bear or Andean bear. Renzo has also been interested in wildlife conservation. His interest in wildlife started at a very young age after watching migratory peregrine falcons arriving near his house in Lima. Renzo now leads Spectacle Bear Conservation Research Program. He designs future programs and plays a key role in SBC's strategic planning. Renzo has a PhD in applied ecology and years of experience in research and conservation throughout Peru. So please welcome Renzo Piana.
Thanks, Robyn, and thanks everybody for being here. My name is Renzo Piana. I work for Spectacle Bear Conservation, and I'm going to tell you a bit about spectacle bears. Spectacle bears are the only bear species living in South America. Unfortunately, there are only 5,000 individuals left in the wild, and their populations are declining rapidly along their entire range. Spectacle bears have these facial markings around their eyes that remind of glasses or spectacles, which give them their name. These markings are unique for each individual, and they don't change with time, making it possible to identify them during their entire life. These facial markings are like fingerprints for us humans. Even cubs have these markings. And they are different from their mothers and from any other bears. Spectacle bears are mainly vegetarians, feeding on fruits that are seasonally abundant, like this overo fruit from northwest Peru. For this, they are very important seed dispersers, contributing to the regeneration of the forests where they live. However, they will also feed on meat when they find it, like this individual that found the carcass of a white-tailed deer around a waterhole. This behavior, however, has been poorly documented. Spectacle bears also feed on wood. And in the Peruvian dry forest where we work, they will finish an entire pasayo tree in 3 weeks' time. Spectacle bears do not hibernate. For this reason, they have ample time to play around. In this video, we see Marco, the bear, sliding through the mud, probably to refresh itself. We see Russ, a dominant male, lying around a waterhole and resting. And we see Chris, another dominant male, taking a bath in a waterhole, probably to refresh after a very long and warm day in the dry forest. And the bird populations are mostly found along the Andes mountain range. They live in many different ecosystems and on a wide elevational range. This is why we at Spectacle Bird Conservation, we work on an elevational gradient that encompasses dry forest all the way up to the high grassland Paramo and Puna in North Peru. Spectacle birds are also found in steep rugged mountain forests, where they are very, very difficult to detect. Forests here are so dense that sometimes it's even difficult to see your own feet, yet the birds don't seem to mind. They are also found in the very wet Puna grasslands and Paramos about 3,000 meters, which they share with other endangered species like this mountain tapir. And even some individuals live in the dry forest, which is a very, very extreme ecosystem. Spectacle birds are very skilled climbers, having large claws, long limbs, and slim body. We at Spectacle Bird Conservation specifically work with the dry forest bird population of Northwest Peru, which is unique in South America. Given the wide variety of habitats they live in, research conditions can be a bit extreme. Not for the locals though. Sometimes they can be very difficult. Here, our field team is trying to reach a water hole used by birds and put some camera traps to monitor the bird individuals. Our team usually goes out camping for several days in a row to find new bird populations, which requires loads of equipment and loads of water. Spectacle birds face many threats, which are mainly related to human encroachment into their habitats. These threats are fostered by road construction across remaining wild habitats, the expansions of towns and agriculture, and the use of fire to clear forests and establish new pastures. These fires, however, can sometimes burn large swaths of forests, causing habitat destruction and fragmentation. In this picture, we see individual points of birds that were radio-colored, each color representing a bird individual. And as you can see, none of the individuals that we monitored crossed to the other side of the river up north, which make us think that this population might be already isolated. Here is an actual picture of how the landscapes look. And as you can see, the valley bottom, it's encroached by agriculture and towns, which impedes bird movement from one side to the other. Spectacle Bird Conservation is a Peruvian organization that works for the conservation of spectacle birds and their habitats in Peru. For this, we conduct research, we monitor spectacle bird populations in their natural environments and study their ecology in Northwest Peru. We are trying to better understand spectacle bird habitat use, diet, and how this varies with time and seasons. This allows to predict us species survival and to identify portions of land that are vital for their survival. We rely on the use of camera traps to detect and monitor spectacle birds in their habitats. This is because they are very, very difficult to see in their natural environment. More recently, we're looking into ways to protect portions of land, working together with local owners and communities. As many people share their living spaces with spectacle birds, this means that protecting birds and their habitats is a social process. So we work hand in hand with the local communities who live near the birds and try to find ways of protecting their communal lands. We also rely on local people's knowledge on the landscape and the threats that birds face. Local people usually provide us with very useful information on where the bears live. And for this, we include local communities in our work. In this picture, we see Juliana, a woman from Tokto community, showing the felty products she did with our support and training. These felties are sold internationally, helping her and other women to earn a badly needed income that is not related to extractive activities. At the moment, we have trained more than 50 local women to produce these felties, and we're aiming to train 20 more in the coming years. At Spectacle Bird Conservation, we are committed to preserve spectacle birds. So please, help us protect this wonderful species by visiting our webpage and sharing our work. Many, many thanks.
Gracias, Renzo. That was wonderful. Our next speaker is Dr. Rae Wingrandt, a large carnivore ecologist with an expertise investigating how human activity influences carnivore movements and behavior. Her research is conducted with black bears in the Western Great Basin and grizzly bears in Montana. A native Californian, Rae attributes her interest in wildlife and conservation from the television shows she watched as a child. Rae has a master's in environmental studies from Yale University and her PhD in ecology and evolution from Columbia University. She completed a postdoc with the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation at the American Museum of Natural History. She is currently a carnivore ecologist with the National Geographic Society. She is a scientist, conservationist, equity and justice advocate, and storyteller. Please welcome Rae.
Thank you, Robyn, for that wonderful introduction and warm welcome. Hello to everyone out there. I'm so honored to be here talking to you all today. My name is Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant. As Robyn mentioned, I'm a large carnivore ecologist, and I'm here to talk to everyone about my work with black bears and grizzly bears in North America. And it is quite an honor to do this. It is my life's work that I'm dedicated to. And it has been a wonderful and interesting journey to get here. So without further ado, I'm going to dive right into the presentation. Although I'm here to talk about bears, I think it's important to start with my origin story as a carnivore ecologist. So I began this work as a young scientist working in East Africa on lions. And I was so interested in studying the movement and the behavior of lions in landscapes where there were also lots of people. So I lived with a Maasai tribe of people who herded livestock across the landscape and often had interactions with lions. And so I would put these radio collars on lions, like the one you see here, to try to follow their movements and understand how close they got to the Maasai people and their livestock. And I use this information to make recommendations for how conservation can be done to protect these animals and people. Over the years, as my interest grew, I also really longed to do some of this work back in my home country in the United States. And so I thought about where I'm from, which is California. I'm speaking to you from California now. And the larger Western United States has these similar issues, but with a different species. And that's what brought me to studying black bears and eventually to grizzly bears in the US. So these days, my study systems look a lot more like this than parts of East Africa. And I do a lot of my black bear work in the Lake Tahoe Basin, which is right in the Sierra Nevada mountain range that separates California and the state of Nevada. Only about 3 or so hour drive from the Bay Area in San Francisco, where I was born. And there is a small but growing population of black bears in the Lake Tahoe Basin on the Nevada side. And they are getting bigger by the day, but also face a number of threats from living in such close proximity to people. So I'm not just studying the ecology of these black bears, but also some of the threats and possible solutions that people can make in order to keep them around. Again, like with lions in Africa, I do a lot of this work by picking up a signal from a collar around the bear's neck tracking their movements and understanding what habitat they're using, and often what habitat they're not spending a lot of time in, what that might mean and how we can make that habitat higher quality for these animals so that it can be useful for them. Picking up signals from bears in the forest is how I spend a lot of my time, and it's really rich and wonderful data collection. I often am known to do more hands-on work. So it means picking up information from tiny bears like this one. We try to get the young ones, sedating them so they take just a little nap while we're processing them, weighing, measuring, taking hair samples and blood samples for genetic work. Understanding the DNA and the DNA structure of these bears provides so much information: where they're from, who they're related to, how the population is growing. And then we release them right back into the wild. And also, just like my original work in Africa, I do a lot of work with the community, the people who are living with bears. This is a photograph of the police who were called when this black bear wandered into somebody's yard. The police didn't have tranquilizer guns, I did, so I was able to go out, tranquilize this black bear, and when the police saw that it was down safely, they wanted to get their own picture with it. That never surprises me, because although bears are really interesting and important to our ecosystems, as North Americans, they're also really important to us culturally. They're these amazing, strong, powerful animals that, when they're not being a nuisance and causing some conflicts, they are of supreme interest to us. One of the most pivotal parts of my black bear research is looking at their denning behavior. Black bears, like grizzly bears in North America, hibernate in the wintertime, and female black bears even give birth during the winter. So finding them in their dens, again, tranquilizing them so that they take a little nap during this process, is a great way to check on their health. The health of a black bear is a great indicator for the health of an entire ecosystem. So finding a really big, fat, healthy female like this one here, and the baby cubs that she gave birth to while hibernating, is a great example to me that the forest that she's living in is really healthy, really thriving, and providing all the resources she needs. These bear den checkups are some of the best part of my work, and I want to give you guys a little peek inside what it looks like when I do them. So check out this short video.
Hi, baby. Hi. Hey. Hi. Hi, welcome to the... Hello. One animal, one cub. We'll sex them in a little bit.
We got a scrapper.
Oh, this is number 2.
I'm gonna get her out.
Okay. And again, we just have to see exactly how many cubs are
I'm
here
gonna
with the
pig
mother.
pour.
It's at least 2, it could be 3.
Possibly.
You gotta keep them warm because they've never experienced the real cold. As soon as we start processing them officially, we'll sex them, weigh them, measure them, give them some type of tag so that when we find them again in the summer, we know who the individuals are. But most importantly, they gotta stay warm and we gotta move quickly.
Thank you for paying attention to that adorable video. It just warms my heart whenever I'm able to share it with folks. And so, to give even more purpose to some of this important bear den work, one of the reasons we do it is to keep our eye on how many cubs a mother bear may have given birth to while she was hibernating, because I always follow up, and so does my team. We look for these bears again in the summer and again in the fall to make sure that the mother bear still has the same number. In this image, this is one of my favorite bear families where the mother bear gave birth to 2 cubs of different colors, which often happens in black bear populations. And I followed them for 1.5 years to make sure that these cubs survived their earliest years with their mom. That's because my data shows that the highest mortality rates are for cubs rather than adult black bears. And it's all due to human causes. Human-induced mortality to black bear cubs is the leading source of mortality for all black bears in my study system, and it's mainly in the form of vehicle collisions. That's really important information because it gives us something to work with. As a conservationist, I can make recommendations for wildlife overpasses or underpasses and do some fundraising to figure out how we can protect people from vehicle collisions with bears and protect bears from vehicle collisions with people. This is another one of my favorite mother bears and her 3 cubs, where they grew bigger and fatter over time, and every time I checked on them, they were healthier and healthier. Again, it shows us that conservation in this region is working, and the black bear population is bigger and stronger and healthier than ever, while still feeding on their traditional food resources instead of bothering people. So most of the time, I look like this, really, really happy, up in the mountains, in these alpine areas, studying my absolute favorite species. And after doing this for many, many years, I got a wonderful opportunity to shift gears a little bit and go to a very different ecosystem. I was brought to the northern Great Plains of the United States. So the grassland, some of the largest remaining intact grassland habitat on this continent. Many people don't realize that grasslands are some of the most biodiverse habitat, regardless of location, all over the world. And people also don't realize that grasslands are native home to grizzly bears. Right now, grizzly bears are primarily in these mountainous regions because they were extirpated from the grasslands hundreds of years ago, along with many other large mammal species. Wolves and mountain lions and bison were all super abundant in the grasslands of the northern Great Plains and have been driven almost to extinction. I'm focused on the grizzly bears that were once native to this area and how they are returning to this iconic landscape. Grizzly bears use grasslands in many ways. Of course, they hunt prey, but a lot of people are interested to learn that they dig up forbs and root vegetables, feed on grasses and the rich carbohydrate abundant vegetation that the grasslands allow for. This is especially important as they emerge from hibernation and really need to eat the fresh spring vegetables that the grasslands provide. There are 2 strongholds of grizzly bear populations right now in the state of Montana, Glacier National Park and Yellowstone National Park. And conservation in these areas has gone so well that a lot of grizzly bears are actually spilling out of these national parks, looking towards their historic habitat, and quite literally walking on their 4 paws to get to those eastern Great Plains. I'm studying a lot of that movement. So by collaring grizzly bears, like the one in this picture, I am able to see exactly which pathways they're using to get from some of the national parks in the eastern part of Montana to some of those protected areas to get from the national parks in the western part of Montana to some of those protected areas in the eastern parts in the Great Plains. There is an amazing amount of possibility for these grizzly bears to successfully migrate from west to east to areas like the American Prairie Reserve, a protected area in the northern Great Plains that was once abundant with grizzly bears and is now poised to receive them again. However, there might be some difficulty with grizzly bears getting there, and I'm studying a lot of the barriers they face. Although there's some wonderful pristine habitat available for them to walk through, there's also human-built roads and even some disruptive fences that serve as a true barrier to their dispersal. Fences like these with barbed wire might mean life or death for the success of a bear trying to find its native home. Even more, cattle ranches dot the landscape in between the protected areas in the western part of Montana and the protected areas in the northern Great Plains. Many cattle ranchers understand that bears need to move through these ranches in order to get to their native habitat. But many ranchers have intolerant attitudes towards having grizzly bears share the landscape with their cattle. I do a lot of work to identify where attitudes for wildlife conservation are at their lowest, how we can, as conservationists, get to those areas and really educate people about the benefits of wildlife conservation and reduce the threats to the preying on their cattle. This is the human dimensions work that makes my science the most interesting, making sure that people feel protected on their own land while facilitating wildlife conservation. The other part of what I do is looking at the grasslands as they are now to make sure they are biodiverse enough, vegetation rich enough, and have enough food resources so that when grizzly bears finally return to the grasslands, they're able to thrive and increase in population size. So I spend a lot of time in the northern Great Plains doing different types of surveys to make sure that the habitat is rich enough and healthy enough to receive these amazing wild animals. And there's some great news. Although grizzly bears have not established a population in the northern Great Plains yet, their cousins, the black bears, have made their way there. And so they've been caught on camera a couple of times on the Great Plains. This is an amazing sign because often where black bears are able to come, grizzly bears are following in their footsteps. So we're just awaiting for the return of this iconic species. I believe it goes without saying that a conservation talk isn't complete without acknowledging the huge threat of climate change. It's something that I've talked about in the media a few times, and it's really important to understand that as much conservation work as we're doing on the ground, climate change is often disrupting so much of this work, especially when it comes to black bears and grizzly bears, which are two species that hibernate in the winter. When we're seeing winters that have unpredictable snowfall or really warm temperatures, we're finding that black bears, especially in the mountains, aren't hibernating. They're not getting the proper cues to go into a hibernation state. So when the snow eventually does fall, any food sources that they had are now cut off, which forces bears to do things like this one in the photo, which is access food at any cost, going through dumpsters and sometimes just coming up with plastic trash and nothing nutritious. This is a huge threat to our bears, and making sure that we do everything we can to reverse climate change, to combat it and mitigate it, is another huge part of wildlife conservation for me. I could talk forever about black bears and grizzly bears, but I invite you to learn more about my work, support my work, consider donating to the wildlife conservation work I do at my website, raewyngrant.com, and follow along on some of my adventures on all of my social media accounts. Thank you so much.
That was so inspiring, Rae. Thank you so much. For our next bear species, we bring you across the globe to Asia. Our next speaker is Dr. Wong Siew Te, a Malaysian wildlife biologist and tropical forest ecologist. He received his bachelor's and master's in wildlife biology from the University of Montana and has an honorary doctorate from the University of Sunshine Coast in Australia. Wong founded the Borneo Sun Bear Conservation Center in the Malaysian Borneo in 2008. Wong has been awarded with numerous awards and recognitions of his work on sun bears, including a CNN Hero, Reader's Digest Everyday Hero, a Country Hero, and Defenders of the State by the Government of Malaysia, and a feature in the Wildlife Heroes book in 2012. I'm thrilled to share his passion for sun bears with you all today. Welcome, Wong.
Thank you, Robyn. Hi. Today, I'm going to talk about the sun bears, Hyla arctos malayanus. Hyla in Latin name is sun, arctos is bear, Malayanus is Malaya. Some 200 years ago, An American biologist discovered sun bears in Malay Peninsula. That bears happen to basking under the sun. Therefore, he named this bear Gila, sun, Arctos bear, and Malayan sun bears. Besides sun bears also come with several other names such as dog bear. They are small, and when they are threatened, they actually emit a very loud bark to scare away whatever animals that may threaten them. Besides sun bears, besides dog bears, they also are called honey bears, beruang madu, because they really love honey. Sun bears is the smallest of all the 8 living bear species. An adult, full-grown Bornean subspecies is only 100 pounds, about 45 kilograms. And the mainland subspecies is about 100 kilograms or 200 pounds. And from this picture, you can see all the bears have a chest patch. And this chest patch is unique. There's no 2 bears have similar kind of chest patch. So we can use this chest patch to identify them individually. And the function of this chest patch is, we believe that they live in this very dense tropical forest. They sniff on the ground all the time. When they feel threatened, when they feel any animals approach, they will stand up, raise their head real high, and sniff the air and check on the air, at the same time presented the chest patch. Something like, hey, I'm here, don't mess around with me. Sun bears are by far the most arboreal bear species in the world. They spend a lot of time on tree, building nests, sleeping, resting, and there's a good advantage for them to sleep and rest high on top of tree, because in the tropical weather, the forest floor is always wet, filled with a lot of blood-sucking leeches, and also they can escape from predators like tigers when they sleep high on top of tree. They can also harvest fruits directly from tree as well. Means that the quality of the fruits that they harvest directly from the tree or pluck from the tree is a lot higher compared to the one that they pick up on the ground. Sun bears are found across Southeast Asia, ranging from eastern tip of India, eastern tip of Bangladesh, southern tip of China, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, and Borneo. This map, the red area is the extinct zone. Sun bear used to be there, but no longer there because of deforestation and hunting and poaching. The green area is the forest that we still can find sun bears, and the green and the yellow patches are the ones that the forest is still there, but we do not know whether the bears are there. There are 2 different subspecies of sun bear. The Malayan sun bear that found in Asian mainland and Sumatra is double the size of the Bornean sun bear, which is only found on the islands of Borneo. Sun bears are classified as a vulnerable species under the IUCN Red Book listing. Their population is declining for more than 30% over the last 30 years. If this trend continues, they can be classified as endangered, and the populations will become less and less, which is not good for them at all. Sun bear live in the dense tropical forests across Southeast Asia. This forest is extremely rich with biodiversity, and islands of Borneo have more than 3,000 species of trees. This forest is a biodiversity hotspot, so to speak. Beside many plant species, there are many insects, many vertebrate species are found in this forest. This forest is simply rich with so many lives. And a very unique characteristic of this forest is these forests are very tall. In Borneo, the average canopy height is 50 meters. All of the trees that you see in these pictures are at least 50 meters tall. And the tallest tree in the tropical rainforest has been recorded on the islands of Borneo, which is about 100 meters tall or 300 feet tall. And the bears, the orangutans, the gibbons, and a lot of civets are adapted to this kind of tall forest and try to exploit as much as space, look for food, look for mate, and survive in these tall forests. Beside the tropical forest or the tropical primary forest, sun bears are also found in all different types of forest types, such as this riparian forest, forests adjacent to rivers, and then also forests that has been selectively logged, or the secondary forest adjacent to an oil palm plantation. They are extremely robust. They can survive in all different kind of forests as long as they can find food and as long as they are not hunted to extinction. Sun bears are also found in swampy nipa forest. This is a nipa palm. Nipa palm produce nipa fruits, which sun bear eat them as well. And then beside the palm fruits, the sun bears also can eat snails, can eat clams in these types of habitat. Sun bears is just like they are omnivores. They eat both plants and animals. They are very opportunistic. When fruits is available, they will feed on a wide variety of fruits in this forest. Sun bear has been known to feed on more than 100 species of fruits in the tropical forests of Borneo. When they eat fruits, they ingest the seed, and the seed will pass through their digestive tract and then a few hours later come out in their poo. And that process is called seed dispersal. Seed dispersal is extremely important in this forest ecosystem because the further away the seed being dispersed from the mother tree, the higher the chances of surviving. Besides fruits, sun bears also feed on a wide variety of invertebrates such as termite. There are many termite species in this forest are actually feed on live tree. So when sun bear feed on this group of termite, they control the termite population and preventing this group of termite grow too many and kill many trees at one time. So in other words, sun bears act like a forest doctor, keep the forest healthy, and therefore these forests need sun bear to make this forest healthy and then and not being killed by many bugs or many termites at one time. Like I mentioned earlier, sun bears is also known as honey bears. They love honey. One group of the honey that they are eating is coming from stingless bee. Stingless bee build their hive inside a hollow tree trunk high on top of tree. When sun bear found a stingless bee hive, they would climb the trees, use their very sharp claws and very sharp canine and strong canine to chew the tree bark. Eventually, they will excavate cavities, expose the hive, and eat the honey. And that cavities later will be used by other animals such as hornbill as nests. So in other words, sun bear act like a forest engineer by building nests to other for other species such as hornbill, such as flying squirrels. Very important roles. Sun bears is also known as farmer when they feed on earthworms or other animals that found on the ground. They do a lot of digging. When they dig out this soil, they are like farmer plowing the soil, and that soil later will be the seed will be very easy to germinate on this soil that already been plowed, and also this soil have this enhanced nutrient cycle, all did by the sun bears. Sun bears are important food provider. After they feed on the termite nests, after they dig the soil for invertebrates, there's always something left behind. So therefore, bearded pigs, a local wild boar species, pheasants and other birds always tag along the bears to feed on the food items that was left behind by the sun bear. So all in all, sun bear play a very important role in the forest ecosystems. A forest with bear and the forest without bear is very different. Sun bear face many threats. One of the threats that they face is deforestation. Logging is a very important activity in this forest. All of these forests are being logged because of logging activities. And this is the map of Borneo. The green area is the forested area, and the red area used to be the forested area but has been cleared since 1973 up into 2010. Today, only 50% of the Borneo remains forest. Or in other words, Sunbear have lost 50% of their habitat in Borneo since 1973. Beside deforestation, poaching is also a big threat. People here eat sunbears, people here use sunbear gallbladder as traditional medicines, and many bears being poached because of this. Sunbears also being used as pets. Their cubs are extremely cute. Their cuteness really caused them a lot of troubles. Poachers, if they encounter a female with cub, they would not hesitate to kill the mom and then take the cubs to sell it as pets and make profit. All of these activities are illegal. Climate change is another big threat that the sunbear face nowadays. Like here, right now, we see a lot of lightning. The intensity and frequency of lightning increases. A few years ago, we have a sunbear struck by lightning when this bear was asleep high on top of a tree. This is something really worries us as we see during this global climatic change, the weather is changing, thunderstorms, severe weather patterns, all may threaten sunbears. The forests where sunbear found, the fruit cycle is determined by weather, by a drought. When global climatic change, we see there are more rainfall, and then this more rainfall can disrupt the fruiting cycle. So how do we going to conserve sunbear? Back in 2008, I founded the Bonin Sunbear Conservation Center to conserve sunbear through a holistic approach. In this center, we do a lot of bear rescue. In Sabah, there are people keeping bears as pets. When Sabah Wildlife Departments rescue the bear, we take care of the bear. So far, 65 bears has been sent to our center. We help them, we improve their animal welfare and try to raise them. Education is a big thing that we are doing today because we need to educate the next generation so that they know the importance of the sunbears and also other wildlife and also the tropical forest that they live in. So therefore, education is a very important tool that we use to conserve sunbear. Besides education, research is also what we do here. We conduct research on both wild sunbears and captive sunbears. For those sunbears that we rescue have the chance to go back into the wild, we want to give them a second chance. So far, 8 sunbears has been released back into the wild after they are being properly rehabilitated. Ecotourism is a big thing that we are doing. Since 2014, after our center opened to the public, we welcome tourists. The tourists will learn about the work that we do and also learn about sunbear. At the same time, we can generate revenues to pay for all of the activities that we are doing here. Sunbears is very important species in our forest. We need to conserve them as much as possible. We hope our work can give them a better future and a secure future. For those of you who want to know more about our work, please visit our website at www.vsbcc.org.my. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wong. Your passion for sunbears is so infectious. For our next bear, we head north to the Arctic. Our next speaker is Geoff York, the Senior Director of Conservation at Polar Bears International, where he brings nearly 30 years of Arctic field experience focused on polar bear conservation and research. Prior to joining PBI, Geoff was the Arctic Species and Polar Bear Lead for WWF's Global Arctic Program, working on international policy issues in Canada, Norway, Russia, and even Alaska. He has also worked as a biologist for the U.S. Geological Survey's Polar Bear Project. Geoff is a member of the IUCN Polar Bear Specialist Group, the U.S. Polar Bear Recovery Team, the Polar Bear Range State Conflict Working Group, and sits on the advisory board for the International Polar Bear Conservation Center. Geoff has dedicated his career to the conservation of polar bears and their Arctic home. He is based at PBI headquarters in Bozeman, Montana. Welcome, Geoff, and take it away.
Hello, WCN 2020 Expo. I'm honored to be here among these inspiring conservationists working on behalf of wildlife across the planet. My name is Geoff York, and I'm the Senior Director of Conservation at Polar Bears International. I've worked in the Arctic in one capacity or another for almost 30 years, with 20 of those being focused solely on polar bears. That includes 16 seasons of capture out on the sea ice working with wild polar bears, and a couple of years as chair of the Polar Bear Range States Conflict Working Group. Most recently, I spent 2 months out on remote Wrangel Island in the Russian High Arctic. I was out there doing an abundance survey with the University of Washington's Dr. Eric Regier to try to figure out how many polar bears use that island in the ice-free season. I'm excited to share my passion for these bears tonight with you and to highlight the work we're doing at Polar Bears International to ensure their future. One of the polar bears' most distinguishing features is their relationship to the ice and to the ocean. Sea ice is much more than just a frozen platform. As sea ice starts to freeze, it starts to expel salt from the ice, creating channels. Inside those channels, as sunlight starts to filter through the ice, algae begins to grow, and that algae forms the base of the Arctic ecosystem. So in the Arctic, ice is much more than just a dock. It's actually more like soil is to a forest ecosystem. Polar bears are the largest four-legged predator, and they're specially adapted to life on the sea ice. They have things like 2 layers of fur, one very thick underfur coat that both provides warmth and helps wick moisture. They have curved, sharp claws for grabbing seals, and the pads of their paws have these little bumps that we call papillae that help provide traction on slippery ice. Here's a quick clip of those adaptations and actions, or some of them. This video was taken in Svalbard, Norway, and it's one of the few we have of a bear actually catching a seal. You can really see that explosive speed they have over short distances as the seal is trying to escape back in the ocean. Polar bears live across the circumpolar Arctic. Scientists and managers have divided the world's polar bears into 19 subpopulations, and these are used to inform management, research, and policy. About 2/3 or 60% of those bears live within or are shared directly by Canada. Polar bears also occur in Greenland, Norway, Russia, and the US. As we take a deeper dive into the polar bears world, I'd like to share a word from our chief scientist, Dr. Steve Amstrup.
Polar bears have captured the human imagination. Giant white bears that roam around in an environment that looks like the surface of the moon. You know, sometimes I've looked down and wondered how anything could even survive there, much less thrive there. Polar bears depend on the surface of the sea ice to catch their prey. They feed mainly on 2 species of seals, ringed and bearded seals, and they can only catch them from the surface of the sea ice. They can't swim around in the water and catch seals very effectively. Polar bear habitat is sea ice. It literally melts as temperatures rise. So more CO2 in the atmosphere means warmer temperatures, means less sea ice for polar bears to hunt on. Melting sea ice turns our normal conservation models on its head. Historically, conservationists thought about what they could do on the ground, hiring game wardens, building fences, but we can't build fences to protect the sea ice from rising temperatures. This conservation challenge can't be done in the Arctic, can't be met in the Arctic. We need to meet this challenge at home where we all live. Information, education is the most important thing that we can do. We have to reach out to people, explain what the problem is, and inspire them to make a difference.
So as you heard from Steve, polar bears rely on sea ice for their long-term survival, and that sea ice is rapidly disappearing. That's why the IUCN Polar Bear Specialist Group has polar bears classified as a vulnerable species, citing sea ice loss from climate change as the single biggest threat to their survival. Other threats include human-bear conflict along with disturbance from things like oil and gas development. At Polar Bears International, we're working to address these threats and to sustain the future for polar bears across the Arctic. We invest significant time and resources in global education and outreach initiatives. People need to know about a species in order to act on behalf of that species and to protect its habitat. And since most people likely won't see a polar bear in the wild, connecting global audience to these animals through educational webcasts, Arctic Live cameras, and zoo ambassadors is an essential part of polar bear conservation. We know that ultimately it's not people living with bears in the north that need to act, but it's people in southern latitudes. We also support and run research projects in 4 of the 5 polar bear nations: Svalbard, Norway, Hudson Bay in Canada, Alaska in the United States, and new work on Wrangel Island in Russia. This research, be it population counts, tracking, or den monitoring, helps inform important policy decisions. Given that the greatest long-term threat to the survival of polar bears is climate change, our biggest conservation challenge lies in harnessing collective action to address that global threat. Simultaneously, we're working to build relationships and with partners on the ground to preserve as many polar bears as possible today, maintaining healthy populations for as long as we can. One way to keep existing populations of polar bears healthy is to protect den habitat and denning families from disturbance, mainly oil and gas development. Polar bears have always had a low reproductive rate, very low compared to other large mammals. A female polar bear will typically only have about 5 litters in her lifetime, each of those being 1 or 2 cubs. For that reason, protecting polar bear denning areas has always been important to their survival, and it is even more vital than ever due to the threats polar bears face in a rapidly warming Arctic.
Denning is a critical and vulnerable time in a polar bear cub's life. After years of studying the denning behaviors of polar bears and testing the ability to find dens hidden under the snow, 2 things are clear. First, a stable and uninterrupted denning process is essential to the survival of polar bear cubs. The loss of cubs contributed to the 40% decline of the southern Beaufort Sea polar bear population between 2000 and 2010. Second, aerial forward-looking infrared, or FLIR surveys, used to locate and protect maternal dens from disturbance have been missing over half of the polar bear dens known to be within surveyed areas. In a new research paper, FLIR surveys conducted by oil field operators between 2004 and 2016 found that only 45% of known dens were detected. FLIR can be an incredibly effective tool for research when conditions are just right. However, weather and other factors impact the accuracy of FLIR surveys, which is likely only to decline as global warming continues, bringing with it more unpredictable weather. Limitations of this technology suggest that denned mothers and cubs may be increasingly in harm's way. Given the threats to the southern Beaufort Sea polar bear population and increasing difficulty using FLIR in real-world conditions, scientists emphasize the importance of developing and testing other den detection methods. As the Arctic continues to warm and sea ice melts, the challenges polar bears face are immense, especially polar bear mothers and their cubs.
As you can see, understanding polar bear denning behavior is critically important as human activities continue to increase across the Arctic. This is why we focused so much energy over the last 15 years or more on denning studies. Initially begun in Alaska, one of our longest running programs involves using remote cameras to monitor polar bears emerging from their dens in the spring. These maternal denning studies are now ongoing in Svalbard, Norway. In this clip, you can see our team installing these remote cameras, now the size of a small pelican case, which can be towed in a sled or behind a skier to the site. These systems are then anchored in the snow and deployed near known den sites prior to a female emerging from the dens. Generally bear-proof, but we have had some taken out by curious muskox. The camera will ultimately capture footage of the female and her cubs emerging from their dens, providing us key information on things like reproductive success, timing of den exit, and an understanding of the time spent at the den site prior to returning to sea ice. Also, near-term cub survival and data on disturbance. It's really important to understand, too, if or how all of these things might be changing in a rapidly warming Arctic. These findings help managers and policymakers establish the best possible guidelines to protect denning moms and cubs. Another essential component of keeping wild polar bear populations healthy is decreasing human-bear conflict wherever possible. As sea ice loss increases, more bears are spending more time on shore in more places. This is putting them at greater risk of running into people. Bears are highly curious, and they're typically unafraid. They follow their noses, and that can lead them directly to camps and to communities. While not typically aggressive, a curious polar bear can become dangerous quickly. Also, in all negative encounters, bears are more likely to be hurt or killed, and sometimes they harm people and property. This is a major concern across the north. So developing solutions that decrease risks to people and injury to both people and bears is increasingly important. We know that as the Arctic continues to warm, we need to keep communities safe and protect as many bears as possible. One of our most innovative solutions to this challenge is a pilot project using compact surveillance radar to detect bears. These radar systems have great potential to help alert communities before a polar bear ever enters town. It can then alert by either sending an alarm, activating a strobe light, or even sending an email or a text message to a conservation officer who can then respond. We've mounted this system in a few locations near Churchill, Manitoba for initial testing. And this is kind of what it looks like on the screen. So here you see a point tilt zoom camera locking on to a bear target there in the center as it wanders around out on the tundra. Here's what that looks like to the operator. So that same video is in the upper left corner. The main screen there, the black dot shows where the radar is located and is showing you a track of a target. So this allows, again, conservation officers and managers to respond to something in real time and send staff directly to where the issue lies. As you can see, our conservation challenges are complex with polar bears, and we're working towards solutions by pushing widespread climate action, building relationships, supporting efforts on the ground, and working across the north. And as we zoom out from the Arctic and look at all the bear species we've heard about today, Andean bears, grizzly bears, black bears, sun bears, and polar bears, just imagine what we could do if we worked together to conserve all of their habitats. Imagine all other life that would be saved and what that would mean for ecosystems across the planet if we acted. This is a unique moment in time when people are rethinking the way we exist in the world. It's also an opportunity to carefully consider what we bring forward and to choose a future that's good for bears and for all of us. At Polar Bears International, we believe that hope is a verb, and we work collectively to address the climate crisis by letting our elected officials know we want swift, bold action on climate change today. It is not too late to act. We hope you'll join our efforts and work towards a more sustainable Earth for polar bears, for all bear species around the world, and for all of us.
Future generations of people and polar bears depend on the decisions and plans that we make today. The key to getting the climate back to functioning the way it should, and to preserving a future for polar bears across the Arctic, is to move away from using fossil fuels for energy altogether. The most important thing we can do is vote with the climate in mind to let our leaders know we support a swift transition to renewable energy sources. In the meantime, we can directly participate in and learn more about our local and regional renewable energy options. We can all make a difference outside our own households by influencing where our energy comes from. We hope you leave here feeling inspired and return home to leverage your voice and your influence. because together we can make sure that polar bears roam the Arctic sea ice for generations to come.
Thank you so much, Geoff. I'm so inspired by these stories about spectacle, sun, grizzly, black, and polar bears. I hope you can see why the 5 of us have dedicated our lives to these amazing species. I invite you all to join myself, Renzo, Ray, Wong, and Geoff in questions and answers starting now, where we will answer any questions you have about bears. Thanks again so much.